we're going to talk about resumes. And I've been job hunting for a little while now. And as I went through resume recommendations, the resume workshops at the various job clubs, going online, searching for answers about how to make the perfect resume and all that fun stuff, I started noticing some common threads. And then I started pulling those common threads together. If you ever work with me or you ever see me in one of the job clubs, I'm the guy constantly taking notes. I picked up a mantra a long time ago: take notes, there's a test tomorrow. You don't know what the test is going to be on, so you got to take notes on everything, okay? That's the way life works. So we're going to walk through some of that. We're going to look at some of the top things that I've teased out of the world about things to do, things not to do, how to take on the ATSs, and how to use cars. And not the ones with wheels, but the bullets on your resume, okay? So first, we got to admit, it's frustrating. You mentioned pulling your hair out. You craft these resumes, you put them into those systems, and sometimes they don't even give you the decency of an automated robot saying, thanks. You just get nothing. And, you know, it can frustrate you. It can drive you crazy. Make some people angry. Don't do that, by the way. That's not good for your wrist. But we got to take a deep breath, look each other in the eye. Everybody unmute, because I'm going to have you repeat after me, okay? Are you ready? It isn't you.
It isn't you.
Okay? Pretend you're talking to one of the other people here or yourself, whatever makes you comfortable. But say it again. It isn't you.
It isn't you.
Okay? So you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get upset. You might even get brought down a little bit. Reach out to somebody who's going through the same thing you are. Help pick each other up. We're in this together, so we need to help each other wherever we can. Whenever you're feeling frustrated or brought down or just you want to vent, call me, call Todd if he's up for it, and just go, right? We're here for you. You're here for us, okay? Now, that begs the question, if it isn't you, what is it? So that brings us to my favorite subject, history. Now, we're not going to go into the Bronze Age or anything, but we're going to go back a few decades, and we're going to look at two things that came along and utterly changed the world, ourselves, our working lives, our personal lives. And they were both invented with the best of intentions, and I think we know how that parable goes. So the first one was email. You could communicate, you could send it, no postage, nothing getting lost in the mail, instant communication the world over. It's supposed to make us more productive, more efficient, better at communicating. Many people would argue that it did none of that. It just gave somebody who makes spam an excuse to flood our inboxes and drive us nuts. In some cases, it does help, but in a lot of cases, it can lead to miscommunication because a species that came about communicating with each other face-to-face with words and gestures is now reduced to so much text, and it's easy to misunderstand things. And the other thing that came along that was supposed to dazzle us and put the wealth of human knowledge at the tip of our fingers was the internet. If the people developing that knew we would spend so much time watching cat videos, then they probably would have not done it. They're like, never mind, right? So what does that mean, though? It means that anybody and their dog, as the phrase goes, can apply to any job, anywhere on the planet at any time. And I'll give you a quick example. This young lady is an internet superstar. She lives in outer Mongolia. She uses that eagle to hunt wolves to protect her family's livestock. She posts videos, GIFs, selfies, and she's got fans all over the world watching her do it. But say she gets tired of stardom and wants to retire to somewhere remote where nobody's going to know who she is, a place nobody's ever heard of. So on a break, she gets on her phone, she starts scrolling through job boards. Lo and behold, here's a job in Quail, Texas, up on the internet. Population 16. Nobody's going to know her there, so she pulls up her resume file, tweaks it a little bit, sends it off. And so do hundreds, if not thousands, of other people. Now, prior to email and the internet, a company would post a job in a newspaper or an article, a magazine or a trade journal, and they might get 5 or 6 resumes a day. They hand that to the personnel manager. They glance through them. They fish out 1 or 2 to hand to the hiring manager. Everything was relatively easy and calm. But with the emails and the internet, the people on the receiving end of it were suddenly drinking from a fire hose. And they really wanted something to stop. So imagine this is their early attempt. And they put up some email filters, dedicated email address, hired a couple of interns, taught them how to scan through resumes better. If you don't know, this is the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And his line was, "None shall pass." If you remember the movie, he was comically easy to get past. And so were these early attempts at filtering. Even though everybody thought it was invincible, it got overwhelmed anyway. They didn't get anywhere. So the companies, the HR people, the managers brought all the smart people in the room and said, let's use this technology and come up with something that really will bring down the numbers. And they came up with the ATS systems we know today. And the ATS systems stand up and they tell you, and sometimes nobody gets through. They can be set to be way too efficient. The last time I had a job opening at Radio Shack, I created a new entry-level job, so I was going to pull in someone from the outside. We created the job posting, gave the information to HR. This is in late 2008, so keep that in mind. In 2 weeks, they gave me 5 resumes. Now, unemployment had spiked up to 7 or 8% by that point, if I remember correctly. How was I only getting 5 resumes? So I talked to the HR manager, I went down, and I wanted to understand the system. So they showed me a little bit about how their system works and what their instruction set was. So the preferred qualifications were entered as required. The ideal candidate has was entered as required. So all of those things, and for this position, my preferred and ideal stuff combined with the minimums they're directed to have in there, basically meant almost no one would qualify. So I got them to turn off a couple of the switches, switch it back to preferred or ideal and not required, ran it, 200 resumes popped out. Now, if I were a little more rational, I would have said, let's put a couple filters back on before I go digging through 200 resumes. But since I asked for it, I went through the 200 resumes. Most people don't have the time to do that regardless of their dedication. Out of those 200 resumes, I found 10 that were really good. I gave 5 of them to another buying group that bought different types of materials. They hired 2 people out of those 5. The 5 I kept for myself, brought them all in for interviews. A few of my teammates came with me. My teammates hired 3 of them. 1 of them we didn't hire. And the last one, the one I kept, was probably the best hiring decision I have ever made in my life. She turned to pure gold. And she got herself accelerated out from under me in months, but that was great. I'm like a proud father with that. It was wonderful. But none of those candidates came through with the default settings. And if I hadn't been an annoying person wanting to find out stuff and go and pick things apart and just accepted it, I would have had 5 substandard candidates and I might not have even picked one of them because of the way the settings ended up. So we have to understand that, you know, the people trying to filter this, they have to deal with the machine, they have to deal with their management, telling them how to use the machine, and then they have to try to fold in what the people wanting to fill the position have to put into the machine. So it gets real complicated and it's not easy on anyone. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of context on how the ATS works and how we got where we are with that black hole that we as job seekers see as an ATS from the ATS, you know? So the best way past the ATS, you've heard it before, you're gonna hear it again, nobody will stop saying it. You do a little bit of networking. When you're done with that, you do some networking. And after all that, you do some networking, okay? That's the best way in anywhere. Everybody tells you 80% of the jobs are filled before they're ever posted. and all the hiring goes from networking, knowing the hiring manager, knowing the HR manager, knowing somebody in the company. Now, the world continues to evolve, and it's becoming less and less common that a hiring manager can simply march down to HR with a resume and say, give me this person. That person still probably has to have their resume go through the ATS as a formality. They have to have HR review it, do all their checks, verify and vet, because companies don't want to expose themselves that way. The hiring manager could make a monumental mistake in who they picked out, and then it's on the company to clean it up, fix it, or deal with it. So it's not common that they can simply say, hire this person, I said so. So even with that, your resume may have to go through the machine. So I'm going to show you some things that will help ensure your resume gets through the machine and has a better likelihood of running into a human being. Okay, so here are the things I've learned about ATSs and resumes. You want keyboard characters only. I've read lengthy online debates about the use of dashes. That's how down the rabbit hole I got. I'm hopefully saving you from some of that. If you have to use the control key or the alt key to create a character, you probably don't want to use it unless it's very, very specific to your profession and a very known thing in your profession, okay? You don't want images, tables, or other non-text items that could mess up the format, which gives them a reason to filter you out. Okay, I'll show you an example of that in a minute, but I'll put in the caveat that a wonderful woman named Pam Otten, O-T-T-E-N, came up with a first page for her resumes that she calls a T-chart cover letter. Now, as a cover letter, it usually goes through a different system than the ATS. If the ATS says your resume is good, then they bring out the cover letter and someone reads it. So that's good. But also, it's a table or a chart, but it's a separate page. So if the ATS mangles it, it doesn't mangle the rest of your resume. So that's a safe thing to use if you want to try it out. I've tried it out a few times. My results are mixed. She said it got her a lot more work. Of course, she's in HR, and it may be that that's the kind of format that the HR people were looking for because it made it easy to see requirement, accomplishment, and a nice, neat little table. So look her up. Her presentation's on Launchpad's YouTube channel, and she has a small book on Amazon for like $4 that tells all about it. She's kind of a research fiend like me, only from a few years ago. Now, as far as the cool stuff on your resume, if you're in a creative field or you're in actuarial and you need tables and charts and things like that, put those on the resume you take to your interview or you give to somebody. When you sit down for the interview, first thing you do is hand someone, here's a fresh copy of my resume for you to look at while we're talking. That shows you can take charge of a situation. It shows you're confident and assertive, which are all pluses. It also evens out the power dynamic in the room so that everybody's on equal footing. And somewhere along the line, someone will have lost your resume, forgotten to print it, misplaced it, or not even remember they had an interview that day and came rushing in. You save them the embarrassment of having to ask for a resume or look over someone's shoulder during the interview. So you gain some points there as well. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, as far as non-text items go, I found a lot of them in templates. So not all of us are Word gurus and can do the formatting and the layouts and all that fun stuff in Word easily. So it's tempting to download templates. So I downloaded a resume template. And when you right-click and select all on the text, you don't see this. When you click and drag across the page, this little guy pops up. Now that's a text box, an image box. He's just kind of hanging out there. You won't see him unless you put an image in or you drag across the page. Some ATSs would see that image box and say there's an image supposed to be here and then scramble all this stuff up to make room for the image. When it comes out the other end, even if the ATS scored you well, the HR person's going to look at it and say, this dude don't know how to format a Word document. I'm not taking a chance on him just because that thing was in there. So whenever you bring down a template, first thing you do is put your cursor in the upper left corner and drag to the bottom right so that you can highlight everything and make sure you catch little guys like that. Now, if you want to put an image on your resume, I don't recommend it for the ATS, but it's already there for you. So keep an eye out for things like that and be careful. Some of the newer ATSs probably would just go right by it without any problem. But you never know how old the ATS is, or if the company's outsourcing the ATS filtering or screening or something like that, especially if they only take applications through Indeed or one of the other job boards. Then in all likelihood, it's going to a third party who's then going to run it through their ATS, which we don't know the origin of or the age of or how it's laid out, and then reporting back the results, okay? Things to keep in mind. Now, here are some of the other top hits, mostly from the Austin area, but also a good bit of backing up on the internet. If file types aren't clearly stated, use a .doc. Every version of Word and most versions of other word processors can save in the .doc. That's one of the oldest file formats out there. Every ATS in the world can read it, as far as I can tell, okay? If they do specify the file types and you can use a PDF and you want to use a PDF because that cements the formatting for you, that's great. The ATS, the newer ATSs can scan them, they don't have a problem. If you're sending a resume to a recruiter, you may be more comfortable sending a PDF because they're going to physically read it. They're not going to run it through a machine in all likelihood. If you're worried about sending a .doc to a company because you're worried about the integrity of your information, think twice about sending it. Because if you don't trust them not to mess up your resume, how are you going to trust them to not mess up your paycheck or your insurance or anything else, right? Just keep that in mind. 12-point font is the most cited minimum. When a document opens up on a screen at 100% zoom, which is the default, if you're sitting at a desk with a reasonably sized screen, 12-point font is still fairly readable. You start getting smaller than that, people are going to start squinting, they're going to have to tweak the zoom, and it's just one more thing that deters them from going through your resume. 18-point is the most cited maximum. That's pretty big. If you go beyond that, it needs to be something extremely important or something you can't live without them noticing, but they may start thinking that, you know, you have some visual impairment or something because you're using huge font. As far as the font styles, this kind of surprised me, but most frequently, Calibri and Cambria came up as cited as fonts to use. Not because the machines care, but because they're apparently the easiest to use, and their darkness when they print on the screen is consistent enough that even if a printer is low on ink, you won't get faded characters, which you might get from the thin or the light or the complex fonts, which they recommend you don't use, like Arial Narrow, Trebuchet, any of the, most of the serifs, and I think that's what they're called. They're the ones with the curly Q's and stuff on the end. Try to stay away from anything that's fancy unless, like I said before, you're a creative type and you want to put that on the resume you hand out to start showing some of your personality or how you fit with the company because you found out the company likes to use that font. For this purposes of getting through the ATS and to the first couple human beings, you want to remember to keep it simple. 1/2-inch margins on all sides where possible. That way, if anything goes funny with the printer settings, or again, they have a really old piece of equipment from the 90s to do their printing with, those things often cannot handle tiny margins. And that'll, again, be an opportunity for your resume to get messed up. And we don't want that. So try to keep that consistent. Here's one that is a common comment, but not always under the recommendations. If you have to break your job, and I'll show you an example in a second, across 2 pages, repeat the company and position info on the next page. I'll show you what that looks like. So here's what you don't do. Here's the company name, the position, company name, dates, brief summary of the company. Some people vary on how much narrative you want to put in here versus bullets, but we get out of the end. This next bullet is on the next page. Now, everybody familiar with Murphy's Law? So the person's reading your resume, they get done with that first page, they set that page down, they start to glance at the second page, the phone rings, someone comes in, the dog barks, something happens that it distracts them, right? So they go back and they're like, okay, what was this person talking about? They got to pick up the other page, read it again, and keep going. It's not a huge thing, but it is enough of a distraction that it can make them not enjoy reading your resume as much as we want them to. And also what's missing here is your contact information on the top of the page. You always want to have that. So here's what it should look like in this case. Here's a repeat of the information. Now it's hit or miss on whether you need to include the brief summary that you had or whatever narrative you had there, because you're repeating this simply to remind them that it's part of this narrative. Your contact information is at the top of the page. That's important because if you have a more than 2-page or more resume, we'll talk about that in a little bit, sometimes the footers may not print or you may not have footers. Then if the pages get separated, it's easy for them to put them back together, and they don't walk in the room with page 1 of John's resume and page 2 of Dawn's resume and then try to sort it all out and get confusion throughout the process without realizing what they've done. That's also another reason to hand out the resume to anybody who walks in the room. That way they have the fresh one that you gave them, that you have control over, so they're looking at it. Okay? Now, here's some other top tips. Save is with Zoom at 100%, so when they get it on their end, it opens up and it looks normal like they expect it to. Now, a lot of people, myself included, will zoom in like 150, 175%, make sure all the alignment's good, every little line and number and letter is perfectly spaced, and it's all formatted. It's easy to find mistakes that way. So put the zoom back to 100% when you save it. Bolding name and section headers, that's kind of a given. Haven't seen anybody not advise that. Most say you should center them. Some say put them on the left. Very few say put them on the right, but I have seen it. I'm not sure why, but it does exist. So it's an option. I don't recommend it. Name and contact info on each page, as we discussed. 1 to 2 pages is the most cited. Yes, there are exceptions in special cases. If you've got tons and tons of certifications or education that needs to go with it, and you have to put those on a 3rd or a 4th page to illustrate it all, that's fine. State and government applications, because of the way they're formatted, they're going to come out 5, 6, 7 pages anyway. So they really don't count, and it's on them because they made us do it that way. But in general, try to keep it to 1 to 2 pages for your resume, especially if you're handing it to people. You don't want to hand them a pamphlet or a booklet. You want to hand them a couple pages so they can scan through it. Numbers and strong verbs, ideally at the left edge, so they catch the eye. $2.1 million, achieved, completed, accomplished. All those good words, all those strong verbs and numbers to pull them into that bullet and help keep them going through your bullets. Generally, go back 10 or 15 years. In my case, I have had 2 jobs that span 18 years, so I go back 2 jobs. But don't go back further than that unless it's relevant. Say they want retail experience and you worked at Best Buy when you were 16. At the end of your experience section, you can put other relevant experience or something similar, then put your role, name of the company, a very brief description of what you did that shows the relevance, and then the date. Now, if you're worried that the date might age you out of consideration, bear in mind, you've got dates on everything else, and you should have a date on that as well to keep it consistent. Plus, it's relevant experience that they were looking for that you have. That should be, the date should be less of a consideration than the actual experience. Okay? Here's, before I go to the next slide, the other thing that comes up almost all the time is the use of white space. Makes it easy on the eye, makes things easier to read. People like white space. They can make notes in the margins, they can box things in, underline stuff, highlight stuff. Makes it easy for the person looking at the resume to read it and mark things up if they want. Here's not a good example. So you can see there's lots of information. It's packed in there pretty tightly. I think that's a 9-point font. And the next slide I'll show you, which looks a lot better, was at the same zoom on the same screen, but with bigger font and a little more white space. That's a lot easier to read. You can glance through that pretty easily. You can see the key points, and you can move on. right? So try to keep the white space, try to keep the 12-point font. Okay, now before we move further into the body of the resume, we need to think about what everybody wants. The machines, HR, the hiring manager. If you read some of the job postings that are starting to crop up out there, you might think they're looking for what I call an invisible pink unicorn. I'm sure we've all got examples of this. One of my favorites was one I was looking at. They wanted a logistics director. They wanted 8 years logistics experience. Got that. 10 years purchasing experience. Got that. 15 years management experience. It's getting a little stretchy, but okay. Master's degree preferred. Must be fluent in English, Mandarin, and German, written and spoken. I wish I had a screen cap of it so I could put it up here. It was glorious in its absurdity. Now, jobs like postings like that do happen. And in my belief and understanding, they happen for 3 reasons. One, the company doesn't know what they're doing, so they're just making a wish list and seeing what they get. It's kind of like that, and all these things would be cool. Put it in there. Or they're protecting the position for someone they want to give it to, but they're, for whatever reason, by the state, by the government, by the nature of their business, required to advertise a position, so they can then say, okay, nobody from the outside met the qualifications or even applied, so we're going to give it to Dave. Okay? And then the third reason is if they're trying to protect a visa of some sort. H-1B visas are most common, so people make up these crazy job postings so they can say, look, they can go to the Fed and say, look, nobody even applied to this job in 6 months. We need an H-1B visa, or we need to renew our H-1B visa. So if you see one of these positions that is a crazy posting and you want to try out for it on a lark, go ahead, but it's usually best not to waste your efforts, right? All right, back to what the more rational people are looking for. They're looking for resources, whether it's people, things, objects. The most common 2 resources people are always after are time and, of course, money. Can you make their processes more efficient so they cost less, take less time, and let them do more? Can you save them money by making this more efficient, renegotiating their contracts, saving them money on what they're bringing in? Can you sell better than the other guys so you make more money coming in from that side by selling their product? Can you close deals faster so you can get more deals through the system? Those are the things they're really looking for. But the other thing you got to remember they're looking for is they're looking for someone who's going to make them look good and smart for hiring you. The machines and the people who make the machines want the machine to show that it's picking out the best candidates. HR, their metrics are based on the success of candidates they bring in. So they've got a lot of skin in that game, and they're really intense about it, because if they bring in the wrong person and they flame out in 30 days, that may affect their raise or bonus or evaluation or the continued employment if it happens too often. So have some empathy for our HR friends, because they're often the ones under the most scrutiny and stress here. The hiring managers, of course, they may not get metriced on whether you work out or not, but they got a lot of stuff to get done. They've got somebody's job spread among themselves and their team, and they need to pull that back together, tuck you in, send you off running, so you can take that stuff off their plate, make their lives easier. And by picking you, and you doing that, and doing it well, they look good in their own right, and they can go on with their career, take on more projects, things like that. So those are the kind of things you want them, they're going to be looking for and wanting out of all of this. Now, the first section of the resume is the top 3 inches, maybe 4, depending on who you ask. And that's your hook. You've got to hook them, get their attention, and make them say, I want to know more. Now, like I said, I've been through all 3 of the resume programs and all the 3 job clubs that we have around. I've done a lot of research, talked to recruiters, listened to presentations from recruiters and resume experts. And this is kind of what you get for the top 3 inches. You got your name at the top, your contact information, the job you're applying to, a brief summary of why you're awesome, some skills that apply to the job, use the keywords straight out of the job posting, some select accomplishments. Now, the summary, different people recommend different things. Kind of the middle of the road is 2 to 5 lines. Okay, I've got 3 here. Skills, formatted like this is safer because you don't have to worry about it getting messed up. If you do like a column, and a column, that can look nice, but it's an easy thing. It's an easy format for people to mess up, machines to mess up, and things to get lost. Putting the pipe between, that's a keyboard character, doesn't offend any ATSs. Also makes a nice distinction for people's eyes to follow. And you want 2 to 3 lines of those. Under select accomplishments, you want 2 to 5 lines, 2 or 3 bullets. And like I said, this is the most common one we get here. The good thing about the local job clubs is they talk to recruiters, they talk to employment agencies, they get feedback from those people on what they're looking for and the kind of formats that they're wanting to see so they can understand the resume. You can vary these. There are even some out there who say you don't need this part, jump straight into skills and accomplishments. If you feel more comfortable doing that, you can. If you want 4 lines here and 2 lines here, that's great. Just remember, you want to keep it in the first 3 to 4 inches from the top. Okay, fold your paper, print your resume out, fold it like it's going in an envelope, a normal letter envelope. Whatever's above that first fold is what people are going to use when you hear about people giving 5 to 15 seconds looking at a resume. That's what they're spending the 5 to 15 seconds on to decide if they're going to go further down your resume. Okay? So any questions here before we move on to bullets? Am I going too fast, too slow? You guys good? Need a water break, anything?
Hey, Darrin, a quick question for you. What's your thoughts on Word format versus PDF?
Well, like I said before, if there's no indication, use Word.doc specifically. Okay? If they say they can read PDFs and you feel more comfortable using a PDF, then do that. If you have Word or several of the freewares out there, you can save in either a .doc, a .docx, or a .pdf. So you can save in any format you want and use whichever one you feel best represents you or you're certain their system can read.
Okay,
That
thanks.
answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So we're going to talk about bullets. It's the only cute bullet picture I could find. So, you know, I think it's from a video game. Anyway, what are bullets? Bullets are, as I said before, they're cars. And we want to think of them that way because you're putting the reader in the passenger seat and you're using these bullets to drive them through your resume, hopefully getting them to the end saying, I want to know more. I want to know how this person does these things because this person looks like this person can do the things we need done. They've done it before, so now we need to learn how. In order to find out how, they have to call you in for an interview. That's the idea. Of course, the acronym stands for circumstance, action, result. There are other versions of this out there with different letter groups and stuff like that. This is the one I use because I like the analogy. For these, you want keywords and phrases from the job posting. You can use jobscan.co to identify those keywords and phrases because it will read the job posting, read your resume, and often it knows what kind of ATS system they're using. So you can then go and Google that ATS and see what kind of formats it can stomach and then better customize your resume. Okay? JobScan will give you 5 free scans per month per email address that you have signed up. So if you're really needing to be super frugal, you can sign up a couple of email addresses and get 5 free scans from each one. You have to clear your cookies on your browser, but you can do it. Ideally, subscribe because they put a lot of work and effort into this thing. It's a good product and they deserve to get money from it. But I also say we deserve to get a job, so you got to weigh those two things in your moral scales. Strong verbs, again, to convey action. Numbers, if possible, be consistent with them. Don't use a whole lot of decimal points unless you're if you're applying to be a job as a statistician, then maybe a lot of decimal points is good because that's kind of what you do. But otherwise, whole numbers or maybe 1 decimal point if you can. Ideally, keep it to whole numbers because that's a little easier for people to digest and understand. 1 or 2 lines per bullet because you want them to be bite-sized bits so they can read through quickly. If it gets into 3 and 4 lines, you probably want to break it up into 2 bullets or shorten it back down. If you have to stretch it to 3 lines to get the information across, okay, but understand that that's not easily scanned. Hand it to someone who knows nothing about what you do and ask them to scan your resume and tell you what they found, what they see that you can do. And if they stop and they get stuck on a particular bullet, ask them to point it out and see if it's the one with 3 or 4 lines, because that's the one that's going to stop people from scanning. They want to scan it quickly, they want to read it easily, and they want to understand it. Okay? Another thing I've learned that I don't know why, but do not put periods on the end of your bullets. They're not sentences. That's one of the few things I can almost guarantee you everyone agrees on. In this day and age, that's a rare thing, but they all say they're not sentences, don't put periods at the end. They're just phrases and participles to hand you information quickly. They're not sentences, don't make them sentences. Apparently that's a cardinal sin in the resume world, so don't do it, okay? We don't want to go to resume hell. Avoid acronyms that the ATS and HR may not get. You saw in my example, PMP was at the end of my name. Further in my resume, it says Project Management Professional, parenthesis, PMP. Wherever you can, spell out those acronyms and abbreviations because the HR person may not know what they are. It may say, you may have SCRM on your resume, but on the job posting, they spelled it out. So it gets through the ATS. The HR person is sitting there going, I see this, I don't see it, I don't see SCRM, I'm not going to take a chance. I'm going to find a resume where I can identify and match those things up. Okay? Now, if you're in HR, you kind of have a little more latitude with the abbreviations, the acronyms, because you're speaking to your people with the resume. So, and our friends in HR, they've got quite a collection of acronyms going on. They got a lot of letters and alphabet soups for them. So that may be the only case where you can get away with it to a high degree. Okay, remember you want to use these to pique their curiosity. And the other thing you want to do is have some star stories that match up to some of the bullets on your resume, especially if you get nervous in interviews. They can ask you a question. Tell me about a time when you overcame an obstacle, right? And you can say, and if you start to get stuck, you glance down at your resume, your eye catches that bullet, you have a star story just for that occasion, ready to go. And then you can come back up, hand them the star story, and it's like you only paused for a second to think about it, and you avoided anxiety, stress, and worry because you know you've got a backup sitting in front of you from when you handed out the resume and you kept the copy for yourself, right? So definitely do that. Now we're going to walk through kind of an agile approach to building a couple of car statements, okay? So this one starts out with managed a marketing team, okay? You got management, you're in marketing, you got a team. That's not much though. So let's pull it up. You led a marketing team of 6. Try not to say you manage things on your resume. Managing stuff is kind of like a hall monitor. If you lead, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for someone who will bring out the best in others, whether they're on a team or working individually. So leadership is a good thing to have on your resume if you can honestly claim it. Okay, the team of 6. Now, even if you don't have intimate access to P&Ls, numbers, budgets, results, you hopefully know how many people were on your team. So we're going to assume you know that. And then We can, if you're marketing, you're developing something like marketing campaigns, advertising material, flyers, leaflets. So you developed a successful marketing campaign leading a team of 6. If your marketing campaign wasn't successful, don't mention it unless they say, give me an example of when something wasn't successful. And you can bring it up out of your back pocket. It's not on your resume. No negativity on your resume, okay? Everything's positive, everything's good, everything's going forward, okay? Still, we can do something with this. If you have access to the information and you know how much you impacted it, and you increase sales some percent, developing and launching a national marketing campaign, leading a 6-member cross-functional team. Cross-functional teams are widely used, and being able to work with people from different departments, different mindsets, and different groups, bringing them in, getting them to collaborate and work with you successfully is always important. And if it wasn't a national marketing campaign, if it was a citywide marketing campaign, or just for your town, you can say, you know, for the town or the citywide area, you know, you don't have to tell them that it was Quail, Texas with 16 people in it. If they want to go look that up, that's okay. Or if they want to ask more specifically about it, you're already winning because they're asking for very specific details. So keep the information kind of pointed, but a little bit vague. They can see you did these things and what you did, but you're not telling them exactly how you did it because you want them to ask you. Okay, so here's another one that's more germane to my part of the world, which is purchasing, supply chain, things like that. Interact with suppliers as needed. That's kind of like default in most jobs that have dealings with marketers, whether you're a contract manager, purchasing agent, purchasing manager, logistics planner, anything like that. You're gonna have people supplying you goods and services, whether they're internal, external. You need to be able to work with them. So let's develop a positive supplier relationship. Hopefully, if you're in that kind of role, you're working to develop positive relationships. That way, when stuff hits the fan and you really need their help, they're ready, willing, and able to help you. Going further with this, you achieve positive results with suppliers through a collaborative relationship. That's always good. You want to achieve things, you want it to be positive. It's collaborative and it's a good relationship. A little further with it, you can create a collaborative relationship with suppliers to improve inventory on-hand positions. That's one of the goals of someone who's dealing with suppliers, especially when you're dealing with goods you bring in for a warehouse or manufacturing environment. On-hand positions is one of their key things. Going a little further with it, let's add the fact that when you improve your on-hand position, it reduces your inventory on hand or your inventory carried, because your on-hand positions are in better, stronger shape, so you don't need to have as much in stock. So there you've added a little bit more meat to it, because one is a side effect of the other. And if you can add numbers, and you can have a percentage reduction or a dollar amount reduction in inventory carried by creating a collaborative relationship with suppliers and improving on-hand positions. So I kind of use the agile process to walk through these. And what you can do is when you're starting to build your resume, take a Word document and just start pounding out every accomplishment you've had in your career in raw form down that document. And you go back, refine them like this, and then you have a library of accomplishments that you can then use to customize your resume when you're looking at specific roles. And then as you accomplish more in your life, you can keep adding to that library. So anytime you're looking for a job, you've got a ready-made set of car statements and bullets for your new resume, and you can better customize it to fit the job, specific job you're applying to, okay? Now, I realize not everyone has direct access to numbers or the P&L to get numbers from, like I said before. You want to use your honest best guess for numbers and try to avoid using the exact same number or percentage too many times. Now, even though it's not likely, if you improve things by 10% and you have 6 examples of improvements you made and they were all 10%, even if it's the God's honest truth, whoever's reading it is going to start getting suspicious. So round a little bit, 9% here, 11% there, 10% here. And then they're not going to pull out a P&L, lay it in front of you, and say, point to me where these exact numbers are. Unless you're in a CFO position or something similar, where you actually have to explain lines on the P&L, okay? So you're using your honest best guess, and you're trying to format it in a way that it doesn't look repetitive, okay? If you don't know or can't remember, a former coworker might, someone you used to work with. It's a great excuse to reconnect, maybe help each other out, get on that networking we talked about, because, you know, 6 degrees of separation or 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon, depending on how you want to look at the connectivity of the world. Everybody's within a few connections of everybody else. So you can reach out to them and say, hey, Bob in operations, remember this project we worked on? I'm working on my resume and I want to try to remember the details of it so I can use that as an example of how successful we were at ABC Company when we worked together there. And Bob may not know what the numbers were in detail either, but he may remember that Mike in finance was on the team and he's connected to Mike. So you can reach out to Mike and say, hey, I was talking to Bob. We had a great conversation about this. Do you remember this project? Let's connect and talk. I'd like to try to get more information so I remember it. And then you reconnected, you built on those relationships. Obviously, if you left the team in an unfavorable way, you might not reach out to them, but it could be an opportunity to bury the hatchet and start over. That's up to you. Your mileage may vary. In the end, remember, they're there to prompt the question about how exactly you did these things. You want them to want to know more. You want them to want to ask you how you accomplish these things, because these are the things they need taken care of, and you're showing them that you can take care of these things with results, okay? Now, some other thoughts I've come across that are potentially useful. If you don't have numbers, you don't work with numbers, you don't want to play with numbers, then you can find positive comments from your evaluations and use those with or without the supervisor's name. That depends on your relationship with them, whether they feel like you can quote them directly, but you can say, you know, receive top 10% evaluation from my supervisor for my work in this department. Not quite as powerful as some of the others, but if you don't have the other information, it can be useful. If you're in a customer facing or a public facing position and your company has, the company you worked at has social media pages and someone called you out specifically on those, like a customer Sharon comes on and says, Dawn was awesome. She did this thing. She saved my day. I would not be shopping there again if it weren't for her. Then you can take that, put it on your resume, use it as a bullet, because that's real customer feedback that tells them that you keep the customer happy and you get great results. You can also use social media to research companies and learn things that may not be on the company's site. Whether that's good or bad depends. How much of it you believe also depends, because it is the internet. But sites like the company site, Glassdoor, other employee-driven sites, Indeed, they're all going to have the polished, pretty version of everything. And they may not always have the kind of details you might need, especially when you're trying to network into that hiring manager. Those other details you can glean from the social media, okay? And finally, if your resume is working, like you send it out and you get a response rate that's 1 in 4 or better in phone screenings, interviews, or even just conversations about it, then don't change it. Come and share. Tell the rest of us. We all need to help each other where we can. If someone lands on something that works really, really well, let's figure out what works really well about it and how we can use that to help everybody else. Okay? So if you want to talk more or feel like you need to debate pros and cons of these things or any of the positions, I'm open. Reach out to me. Every conversation is an opportunity for me to learn and better understand what I know. There's my LinkedIn information. There's my email. We'll put this slideshow up on the website along with the recording of this presentation, so you guys can watch it again or get more information from there. So any other questions I can answer? I know I went kind of fast, but I'm happy to go back and talk about anything in there.
Guys, y'all can feel free to come off mute if you have any questions or anything.
Darrin, I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for the presentation. There was a lot of really good pragmatic information in there, and I think tips all of us can use. And I know, speaking for the group, perhaps I'm going to open my resume right after this is done and take a look through it, this new information.
Good. Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of the resume companies out there are good, and they're pretty good at what they do, but they tend to tease you with one little piece of this information and then ask for money. So this is kind of like putting it all in one place. I mean, it's not great for their business, but, you know, it helps all of us out because we shouldn't be spending money if we don't have to. Now, I will say if you really need a pro, or you just can't seem to get your head around all of this, the lady presenting next week, Kara, she does have a resume service, and she also runs the Job Seekers Network resume workshop for them for free. So you can get a taste of her work. But if you really just got to have a pro work for you, she would be someone I could recommend.
Yeah, she is quite amazing. Hey, Darrin, what is, I know you talked about JobScan. I don't think you shared the price for if you do purchase it.
The subscription, the best price is like a 3-month subscription. I think it's like $84, $89.
Something like that.
Yeah, it works out to about $30 a month.
Yeah. And so, you know, you've used that a lot. I've used it a little bit. I played with it some, and I thought it was pretty impressive. What's your take on it?
Oh, it's really good. It's hit and miss on if it recognizes the ATS that the company's using. But at least, you know, that's one little extra piece of information. And it's really good at picking up everything. The problem is you can get bogged down. It shows you the key skills kind of first, and then it shows, you know, hard skills and soft skills. And there's almost always a show more button. Address the ones that come up first before you click the show more, because depending on how the job posting is written, it could pick up 50 to 100 words under those other things. Right. And yes, they will score up your score by getting them in there, but sometimes no amount of wordsmithing in the world is going to get some of the things they put in the job posting into your resume. And you just have to recognize the fact that that's, you know, somebody wrote that part of it maybe in a conversational term instead of an actual requirement. So definitely keep reading through the job posting while you're using JobScan and working on your resume, so that you don't get carried away with trying to get, you know, relationship building in the resume when it was just mentioned as one of the very ideal candidate will be an expert at, unless you can find a way to actually claim that skill and work it into your resume. Yeah. So that's a kind of the thing to do, is definitely keep that, try to divide your screen into 3 pieces. So you got the job posting, your resume, and JobScan. And you can look at what JobScan is telling you you need, and then look at the job posting and see how they did it. But also JobScan has another tab, so you can tab over and see where it found that word exactly in the posting. But that can get, the format on that and the readability is not great. So sometimes it's easier just to do Control F on the window you have with the job posting in it. So use that, and also be cognizant of how many times those words or JobScan found those words in the job posting. If it found some obscure word once, then don't sweat it.
Right.
But once you get to about 80%, JobScan claims you'll get through the ATS and to a person.
Yeah, I thought one of the things I heard someone talking on that was that besides, you know, helping you see if your resume is got the right kind of words, it also has been useful for people to realize sometimes that they had really picked a job that really wasn't a good fit for them, right? In other words, like a set of words, and you look at them, you're like, yeah, but that's not really who I am. And so it kind of can sometimes get you out of your fog of just picking something that you think is a good fit.
That's true. That's true.
And so I thought that was kind of a cool concept.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
mean, if you put your if you find a job and it's like, okay, this looks kind of cool, and you dump your resume and the job posting in, and it comes with like a 5% match, then you definitely want to reevaluate how much you want that job and if that job's really a good fit for you.
Yeah.
I like to, when I find a job, I'll read through the job description. I'll read through requirements, preferred requirements, and then search for the word ideal. And if I feel confident after I read through those myself, then I'll leave it, go on with whatever else I'm doing, and then come back a few minutes later, maybe an hour later, read it again, and see if I'm still comfortable and confident with it. And then I'll go through the process of, if I want to apply, of running it through JobScan. Because even with JobScan, you will spend a notable amount of time polishing and crafting and shaping the resumes to get through so you can get to the interview. So it's not as much of a shortcut as sometimes we hope, but it is, as Tom pointed out, a good way to filter both your expectations and your resume versus the posting.
Do you guys have any other questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't know if it's working or not.
Yeah, you're hearing you.
Okay, sorry, it's not lighting up, so I didn't know if it was okay. So the question that I have is, because you're talking about if your resume works, don't change it. Well, in my particular situation, I don't know if it is working or not. So my particular profession is as a worship pastor, and that's what I've been applying to across the nation, is a whole bunch of churches to be a worship pastor. And the thing that I've been noticing is that my resume is getting me to committees, which is good, I guess. I'm getting through the first round and they're saying, we like you enough to send you to committee. But none of the committees are doing interviews. They're just kind of going through and weeding out. And then I think one of them actually even didn't do interviews. They they just flat out like got a bunch of resumes and then offered a contract to somebody. So I guess the question that I would have is, from my perspective, how am I to gauge whether it's working?
That's kind of tough, and it's outside of my wheelhouse, if you will, as far as that particular area of work goes. I'd say if the committee is reviewing it, then follow up in a week or 10 days and say, hey guys, I know you were reviewing my resume. Can you give me some feedback? And especially in the realm of church work and religious work, I would hope that they would be willing and somewhat generous with giving feedback to help you out, because that's kind of the nature of the profession, is helping people out like that. So definitely ask for feedback wherever you can. If you have a way to contact them or somebody in their administration, they looked at it, it doesn't look like you were selected, or they're taking their time. They may come back and say, you're in the short list of 5, but we're not doing anything until the COVID thing is done, because in this state we can't meet with people, and we don't feel comfortable doing it on Zoom or something like that. Who knows what you'll find out? And once you get them talking, then you're already ahead. And even if they're saying, well, we didn't want to bring you in because this person had more training in this area, which is where we need it, then at least you understand why. If they don't get that specific, then at least you know whether or not, or what's going on and what your next step should be. And you've got the conversation going, and it may be possible you could say, okay, I understand I didn't fit with your group, and I appreciate the feedback. Is there another church or group in your area where you think I might be a better fit? And then that invites them to collaborate with you and help you and find somewhere else to be. The same thing can happen with hiring managers. You network in with the hiring manager, you talk to the hiring manager, you think you're in, hiring manager sends your resume down to HR nixes you for whatever reason. They may not say why, because most corporations won't give a reason because they don't want to risk getting sued or anything. But then he can come back and say, or they can come back and say, okay, I couldn't get you in here for this position, and you can thank them for their help and their time, and ask them if they have, if they know anybody or another company where they think you might be a good fit as well, since they couldn't get you in there. So it's all about trying to carry on the conversation and gently tease out the information from them where you can.
That's really good, Darrin. You know, I mean, in the sense that Zachariah, in the sense that they're picking up your resume and they're starting your resume work, because that's really the point, is to get them to do that. But in the sense of whether or not you're a good fit, really has to do with whether that resume connects to their culture enough for them to want to, you know, get you in for an interview or whatever, right? And so I think everything Darrin just said was really good. Also, Kevin put out, you know, to have someone in the industry that you're looking to get into review it, that's not necessarily hiring you, but they are in that industry, and give you feedback. And I know that I've connected you with some people that are in the industry here, right? So, you know, having those guys give you, that aren't necessarily trying to hire you, but they're objective, right? They can tell you like, hey, here's what we would think if we had the position or whatever, right? So that might be another good way for you to get some feedback.
Yeah, and oh, sorry.
That's all right, Zachary. I was just going to add to that. Just make sure whoever you have review it hires people, because I've had people go to, you know, people in the industry, their friends, colleagues, whatever, look at this resume, but they never were a hiring person. So they never went through a resume. So they're giving you feedback and advice without having expertise or knowledge in that space of
right.
what works, what doesn't. So.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And or maybe they have knowledge in that space and that place hires, but they themselves have never really been the hiring person, right? So you really want someone who's had that kind of hiring capacity to evaluate it, because they're going to see it differently than just a worker in their organization, for instance.
Yeah, I've had Paul going over it with me, and that's kind of where the question came from, was all of that. I get, trying to figure out how it works, because I've worked in the secular world and all that kind of stuff, and doing resumes for, you know, trying to work at a trucking company or something like that is vastly different than trying to get hired from a church. So
I imagine
it's
every industry has its own set of domain, right? So
the other thing I would add, Zachariah, that doesn't, you know, is somewhat going to pick up from what Darrin's talking about with JobScan, but also might help you to go a step further, is not only just look at the job requirements, but really take a look at the mission and vision and values of the company. And when you start to see a theme and you start to see certain words that they use in the mission and the vision and values of the company, core values, maybe principles, whatever it is, if those are aligned to you, then you can use those in your resume and start to layer some of that in your resume. Because, you know, I mean, I work for Whole Foods, and 80% of or 70% of what we look at is, do people really align with our culture and who we are as people, more than just technical skills? Because you can, not every company thinks this, but you can teach technical skills or skills. You can't teach personality and values and stuff like that. That's how we've all come up. So if you're looking at your resume, go a step further for that church. If you are trying to be a pastor, what do they believe in? How do they speak? What's their vision? And if incorporate words of those, you know, incorporate that into your resume if it aligns with you, and that may take you a step further.
Yeah. You know, Zachariah, this is what you and I talked about the first time we talked too, right? Is really the technical functional skills are always considered like ticket to ride, right? Like, you know, why would I hire a C programmer if he can't program in C, right? So the real deal is, how will he work with my team and culture? And in churches, there's probably no place where that's more true. Like, the culture is everything. And that doesn't just mean their statement of faith, right? That means, like, you know, are they really, you know, type A and really trying to grow? Are they really being more community centric? Are they, you know, are they really a very collaborative kind of working space, right? So those are the kinds of things that, you know, when you can understand their culture and communicate how you are similar to that culture, that's really what's going to unlock most conversations with an employer. So the more you can learn about the organization from the people that are working there, and really figure out if that's a good fit for you, you'll be able to communicate better with that group of people. So.
Yeah.
And
that's
and I
kind of
think
what Paul told me, is he said to focus on the things that I could offer that would make me stand out, not just as a musician or a pastor, but as like a cultural leader.
Yes, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like what Darrin said earlier. People are looking for people to come in and lead, not just to come in and do work, but to come in and lead and manage something, take something off of someone else's plate, especially at churches. They're, notoriously understaffed relative to the things they're trying to accomplish, right? So can you show up and actually have the integrity and the initiative to really grab something that they need someone to pick up, right? How would you express that?
I think Todd just mentioned something very important. That's the idea that if you're going to lead within a church setting, you really need to be able to attract volunteers. And the other aspect of it is you need to look longer term, because there are trends in churches that need to be dealt with. And every church is going to be different in terms of what is happening over the long term and where they're trying to head or direct things.
Yeah, that's great, John. And that goes back to what Darrin said earlier. When you think about cars, if you can figure out what the problem is that church is dealing with at the moment, and you can show how you've solved that problem before, the likelihood is you'll get a conversation. Not always, but the likelihood. And the last thing we got to remember is sometimes God just doesn't want us in that job or that church, right? And we have to trust in him that because we're not getting the interviews, maybe there's a reason, right? We get so caught up that, I didn't get chosen, and then get defeated, and I didn't win, and again, I got X'd out. But if you look at every sales book out there, and that's what we're doing, we're salespeople right now. It takes about 10 tries to get a maybe or a yes. So think about it. You have to send 10 resumes out to get somebody to look at your resume and maybe want to look at you. Now, if you're more strategic and very, research and stuff, that's probably, that percentage is much smaller, can be, but let's face it, that's a number that's been researched and proven. But then again, the big proof is in God, right? Trusting in God that he will open the door and the conversation of where you need to be. And the ones that he doesn't feel like aligns with you, just might not happen.
Yeah. And, and there's a way that, I once was applying for a completely different role, going from being a software developer to managing the digital camera business at Dell. And, I had this recruiter that was out, and I didn't know they were out. So I eventually escalated, and then I found out they were on vacation. And then they came back, and she still didn't get back with me. And so a lot of my friends were like, oh, you need to escalate again. But I was applying for a marketing job, right? And so my logic was, if I couldn't market her to get back with me, well, then I probably didn't deserve the job anyway, right? So, so use marketing, right? So, you want to be a pastor and an evangelist, evangelize yourself, right? And, feel empowered to do that. But, you really want to, relational evangelism is all about building connection between you and the other, right? So, you're doing all the right stuff, man. You're networking with a lot of people. I know you are, because I've connected you with many, and you're talking to a lot of different churches, and you just got to really stay with that, and feel free to push in a little more. You're probably feeling like, well, I've already, talked to them, but they actually appreciate it because they're just super busy with a lot of things. And so don't feel like you can't push back in a little bit more than you think you can.
There's a word I like to use, or two words. It's called pleasantly persistent. It works.
Yep.
Works.
Other questions or thoughts, guys? We got about 8 more minutes. Sometimes we do breakout groups, but this is actually the time to build community. So, I've actually put in the note, feel free to share and connect with others here. This is part of what this is about, is not just to come and hear information, but, develop a peer group of community. In fact, Darrin and I have been doing that for quite some time. After we met at JSN, he and I and a couple of other people have just been kind of meeting weekly for 30 minutes just to kind of encourage one another and peer. So feel free to kind of start building some network with people, reach out to them on LinkedIn and kind of build your own little team, right? Of people that can encourage you and that you can run things by. That's kind of one of the things we want to have happen. But we do have another, 7 minutes. So if there's any other questions or other things you'd like to know about, even if it's not necessarily on the topic, we're happy to just free dialogue here.
I'm just curious as to what you guys are looking to do next. I mean, I know you're just getting started, but you've got to have ideas about where you're heading, right?
Well, yeah, I think, right now we're trying to run through the first round and just get the sort of a normal curriculum, if you would. But we're also looking to get beyond that. While everybody that's in a job seeking capacity has this immediacy that they're trying to get to, this dot, the reality is our career is a long line, right? And we really would like to bring some aspects to this that are more about calling and career and really being able to find the work you love and not just, the job you need. So we're looking at some of that. We're connecting with other organizations, but we're kind of just taking it slow. We're not even an official, company or anything. We're just a couple of guys who want to help people, and we have a lot of really cool friends like Darrin who are willing to come and partner with us. So, but that's kind of where we are. We just decided we needed to start this and let God guide it. And so that's kind of where we're at the moment, John. But yeah, thanks for asking.
Sure.
I think Darrin hit it on the head, and that's he mentioned being agile, and right, and we just learn along the way. And somebody like you, John, may say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Right, and that may be a great thing that we should try, because it really is. It's about giving back to the community. We have certain knowledge, and we'll share our knowledge, but we're not perfect, and we're not always right. What worked for us may not work for somebody else. So if somebody else brings something up to the table and say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" All right, that sounds like a great idea. So
we're all in this together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
Right.
So
that's how we see it.
Yeah. So don't hesitate. It's not our way. It's the community way, right? We grow better together. So anybody have ideas or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out to Todd or I offline and send us a note. Mention it in the feedback form when you get the feedback form, and we'll continue down this process. With the curriculum, we've got some guest speakers on top of the curriculum, or we'll kind of be fit in within the curriculum. But then there's other things that might come up that we may need to do, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and
we're very open to it, and so we send a feedback form every week. You can fill that out, or you can email us. That's fine too. Most of the feedback we've gotten has really just been like, "Hey Todd, when you send out email, you're using multiple different fonts." I'm like, "Cool, I should fix that," but or "Hey, you misspelled this." Yeah, thanks. Which I appreciate all that kind of stuff too. So that's all good too. But we'd love ideas. We're happy to hear any feedback that people have, and we just really want to keep letting that feedback inform where we're going to go next.
And the last thing I would leave it is this grows as a group, right? Todd's great at marketing it out, pushing it out. I think John, you mentioned it, or Darrin mentioned earlier, sharing. But if anybody knows anybody else out there that's just struggling, and again, I think we're the only group that does it in the evening. And we've thought that I used to be part of a career counseling group in a big church in California, and they did it in the evening, and it made sense. You have to sacrifice some things, but at least if you're working, you can actually break away and do it, and as much as it's about helping those that are in the job search, Job Seeker Network, some others are really set up for folks that are in between jobs to help. We really wanted to, as Todd talked about, we want to take it to the next step for folks that are in their careers. What's next?
Yeah.
How do I go from being a developer to a product strategist? How do I go from, make this change? Am I really doing what God calls me to do?
Right.
And or does he have me where I think where I feel like he has me? So there's a lot more to that.
Yeah. Hey, I think Jim wanted to get a word in here. Hop in, Jim.
Yeah, I really just wanted to say thanks. First time here. I like the vibe, and I got a lot from the session. Thank you, Darrin.
Oh, no problem. Let me know if you need anything else or I can help. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, reach out and I'll add you to my network, and then you can go through my connections and see if anybody's in there that can help you. And I'll be happy to introduce you.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, I like it here. I hadn't come earlier because the 6:30 actually is a bad time frame for me, you know. So maybe if there were other things you might do on other days later, I understand you're just developing. So, you know, I'll be keeping in touch and keeping an eye on you, and I'll try to get here on, you know, Monday evenings.
Yeah, we welcome you anytime. We really appreciate you.
I really appreciate it.
Guys, I wanted to ask one thing that would really be helpful to us. You know, we really want to serve people here. And so I can imagine that almost all of us know 2 or 3 other people that are, you know, also out of work. And it's easy to kind of put something up on Facebook or whatever, but it's just going out to a big group. But, you know, if you know 2 or 3 people that are really out of work and could really be encouraged, I'd love it if you guys could be intentional about like exactly who they are and reaching out to them and telling them, hey, I've been attending this. It's been pretty good. We do put the sessions up. It takes about a day for me to get them up online, so it'll probably be tomorrow. But the last 3 weeks are there. You can watch them. So, you know, feel free to have them watch a couple, come. We'd love to continue to grow the group and get the word out. So appreciate you for that. Kevin, would you like to close us in prayer?
Yeah, yes, I will. And then also just remember on our website, Todd showed the link before at the early on the slides. On our website, we have a QR code that you can scan and put your prayer, prayer request. Todd talks about it being prayer raising prayers to God. So please lift that up. I will ask in this group, is there anybody outside of the general job and career? Is there anything somebody wants to share that needs specific prayer?
Yeah, please share that.
If you feel free to just say it, I'll pray specifically over it.
Okay. Yeah, and the idea of that one is, you know, like your churches talk about, or organizations talk about fundraising. You know, prayer raise, you know, find 2 or 3 or 5 people that can pray with you for an ongoing time period. It's a game-changing idea. It really is.
Totally is. All right. Well, I'll close in prayer. So let's bow our head. Heavenly Father, oh, lovely Father, we're so thankful that you put Darrin in our lives, Lord. You brought Darrin and Todd together and I together, and Lord, and the group here together. But Darrin, thank you we thank God for sharing his words through you about resumes and how to do it and what to look out for, etc. Information was extremely valuable. We're so blessed that you have been put in our lives. Lord, I thank you for this group. I ask that you would bless each individual person with where to go, what to do, the words to use, how to structure their resume, what companies they need to look for. But Lord, most of all, I ask that you just take away any anxiety and worry and let them just be in peace and trust that you will show them the way. You will open the door that they need to be going through. Lord, protect us as we go this week. Let us be strong. Let us connect with the people that are intentionally going to work with us and help us to be stronger with you and land in the job that you have for us. Lord, we lift all this up in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys so much.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Yeah. Let us know if we can help y'all.
Yeah.
Great night and a good week.
Yeah, too.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
This is Todd Boyum, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation of Fellowship Career Network. We meet every Monday evening from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and we hope you'll join us soon. To register and receive the Zoom link in your email, simply go to fellowshipcareernetwork.com today.